one of the most common examples given to help Muslims understand the role of the Quran is actually the imagery of rain. Like Allah will say, salat awdiyatun biqadariha, or anzalna alayha al-ma, He sent water from the sky. And the obvious parallel is, it should be pretty straightforward for everybody to understand. Quran came from the sky just like water came from the sky. The Quran is pure just like water is pure. The Quran brings dead hearts back to life just like water brings the dead earth back to life. So at that level, the parallel should be pretty obvious, right? And it's the water is the way by which all life is sustained on this earth. And Allah's revelation is actually a means by which life has meaning on this earth. So in a sense, life is also sustained by revelation just like it is sustained by water. And that's why water and our relationship with Allah are interconnected. So every time we go and speak with Allah, we must purify ourselves with it. We make wudu, right? And even the throne of Allah, arshuhu ala al-ma. Like in Surah Al-Mulk, when Allah Azza wa Jal describes His kingdom in the very first ayah, He says, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكِ. How blessed and incredibly empowered with blessing, endowed with blessing is the one that has all kingdom in his hand. That's referring to Allah. And by the end of that surah, قُلْ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ أَصْبَحَ مَاؤُكُمْ غَوْرًا. What do you think if your water was to disappear? Because the one of the greatest kingdom, the king of all kings, actually the first manifestation of his kingdom in the Quran is actually water. It's rain. And this is a very important bit of imagery for a student of the Quran. If you're going to journey through the entire Quran, you have to pay attention to water. It's one of the most fundamental themes of the Book of Allah. And I wanted to just say one or two more things about that, just about the relationship between water and the Quran. When Allah Azza wa Jal, for example, says that if your water was to disappear, فَمَنْ يَأْتِيكُمْ بِمَاءٍ مَعِينٍ, who's going to bring you pure, cleansed, purified water? This imagery is actually very complicated, and you have to study a lot of the parables in the Quran to kind of draw a big picture. But I want to, in this session, give you kind of an overview. That's, to me, it just completely changed my life. It really did. It really changed the way I study the Quran, and I think about the role of the Quran in the world, not just for us, for the entire world. I want you to think about rain. It rains all over the world. And of course, because of rain, vegetation is produced all over the world. But vegetation that's produced is not of the same kind. There are different regions that have different kinds of trees, different kinds of flowers. It may be the same fruit. It could be apples. But the apples from one region taste completely different from the apples of another region. Isn't that the case? So the water is actually exactly the same. It's still the same old H2O. But when it meets with the earth, the goodness that it produces is of such incredible variety, and each of them have their own function and their own purpose. As a matter of fact, the plants that grow in a particular region are best suited for the animals that live in that region, and the life that is sustained in that region. And those same plants would not be able to nourish animals from another region. So the kinds of plants that grow in a dry climate like Arizona or something are not the same as the kinds that grow up in the Northeast. And the animals and the plant life, they interact with each other. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because when Allah Azza wa Jal sends the rain, just like He sends revelation, the effect it has on people is not the same. The way that Quran affects you is not the same way that it affects me. And how I am going to sprout, how I am going to mature, how I am going to now come out of the ground and produce, be given life is not going to be the same as you. Not every one of you has to become a speaker, nor are they meant to. Not every one of you has to become a scholar of Islam, nor are they meant to. You're a different kind of plant. That it's the same water, it's the same Quran that inspires all of us. But the good that it produces from us is actually extremely diversified. Some of you are going to be artists. Others of you are going to go into politics. Others of you are going to be historians. Others are going to be academics. You're going to touch virtually every field in human existence. But all of it is going to produce good if it is inspired by the Book of Allah. If it is inspired by the Book of Allah. Now I want you to understand a parable. If you have contaminated water, you still might get vegetation, but that vegetation will be contaminated. And you wouldn't want to eat the food that came from contaminated water, because it's got, in a sense, some level of poison. Our direct relationship with the Book of Allah will actually purify what we produce. And of course, when plants come out of the ground, they don't just feed themselves. They're the ones that are feeding off of the water and the ground, but they're the source of nourishment for everybody else. People inspired by the Quran are supposed to nourish everybody else around them. You see, it's that same imagery that we're building upon more and more and more now.